Hello, and a very warm Yorkshire welcome to Raising the Roof. I'm Nick Atkin, and this is the podcast where we bring together business leaders and industry experts to unpack the big topics that are shaping not just housing but the wider world around us. And I have to say, today's episode is a first for us because it's the only time we've ever welcomed back a guest from a previous season. So if you cast your minds back to 2024, which already feels like a completely different parallel universe when it comes to technology, we were talking about the potential of artificial intelligence, what it might mean, and also, interestingly, where it could take us. So fast forward to today, and AI is no longer on the horizon. It is here. It is changing how people work, how services are designed, and how people and organisations operate and, most importantly, make decisions day in, day out. So now feels like the perfect time to pick that conversation back up. And I have to say, when we were talking about this, when we were prepping for season 5, the first name that came to mind was to invite back Dr. Guy Marshall. Now, those of you who remember our previous episode will know that Guy has a PhD in AI. Just how clever do you have to be to get that? And he also advises organisations, including now housing organisations, on how to use AI in a really meaningful but also responsible way. And my wife loves Guy because he keeps chickens. So, Guy, got to say it, first time ever, welcome back to Raising the Roof.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is, believe me, it's our pleasure. So when we last spoke, Guy, AI felt like it was full of promise, but it was also a bit theoretical for many of our listeners, and indeed for myself. I was dabbling a little bit, and you were encouraging me to do that, but it hadn't really sort of fully bitten, and so many people were just dipping their toe into the AI waters. If you fast forward to where we are now, many of us are swimming in what feels like an AI ocean. And it's become also a basic part of so many people's lives, both at work but also at home as well. So if I could take you back to 2024, what in your mind has changed the most, and particularly how you're seeing people and organisations using AI differently?
So I would talk about social housing providers, I think, because that's what we like to do on Raising the Roof, right? So most providers now have some sort of strategy or approach about AI. 2 years ago, most providers didn't. So that's been a really big change. We have also mostly Microsoft Copilot being used to augment most roles in some way across almost all providers of social housing. And it's probably been about what I would have expected from a very regulated space that tends to adopt new technology quite slowly.
Yeah.
But it's been very, very much just augmenting existing processes a little bit and starting to get some of the groundwork in around the data integrity parts of this that mean that then there's more value to be unlocked further on.
Yeah, so I suppose that you said it was pretty much what you'd expected. So, do you think the fact that people have got a strategy and it's in focus, is that enough of a breakthrough? I'm interested in terms of how this compares to some, other big technological shifts that we've had. I mean, my kids are horrified that I can remember a time before the internet. They equate that to the same time that the dinosaurs were roaming the earth as well. But I remember the internet coming in. I remember my first iPhone. It was amazing. I remember being able to text my wife. My wife and I sat in the same room texting each other on 2 Motorola handsets, and amazed that these messages were popping up immediately. But also, you go right back to sort of the Industrial Revolution. So perhaps not just in housing, but does that AI shift compare with any of those, or is it even bigger? From what because this is very much your world. As I said before, you're the only person I've ever met with a PhD in AI, and I'm always in awe of anybody with that level of intellectual capacity. But where's it sit when people look back? Where will this sit in that sort of seismic change scale?
So, bearing in mind, I'm fully immersed in this world, right?
Yeah.
So I have a particular worldview on this. I also, you might recall, I'm president now of Manchester Statistical Society.
I tell
right?
everybody, it's the first thing I say about you. I say, he can do maths as well. How good is he?
So the Statistical Society in Manchester was founded in 1833, and that was in the context of urbanisation. So Manchester didn't really exist before we had the Industrial Revolution.
And it was the home of the Industrial Revolution as well, wasn't it? That's where it actually started.
Yeah, so we were joking before this about Manchester always raining.
Yeah.
And it's literally there because the moisture in the air allowed the cotton to be spun without breaking.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
Right. I just thought Manchester was there to catch the rain so Yorkshire didn't have to suffer it. So, but there you go.
There's an unexpected side effect. So you think about that sort of that seismic sociological change. So the Statistical Society was trying to understand what was happening to the living conditions of people during this, because there wasn't the census in the same way, so they didn't really know what was happening, and this urbanization thing was happening as a result of this steam technology. Right. So when you talk about the Industrial Revolution, I can't help but map it back to that sort of era.
Yeah.
And in the Industrial Revolution with steam and then with electricity a little bit later, it changed the relation between the physical body, like muscles, and performing labour.
Right, okay. Yeah.
You get where I'm going.
I do.
You can see where I'm going.
No,
with
yeah, I
this.
can. Yeah.
And now I think what we're seeing with AI, in my mind, is just part of the data age. It's just that what's happening is gaining much more attention because of natural language. So like words and pictures also being able to be ingested by data systems.
Yeah.
And what that's meaning is that is much closer to human cognition than it used to be, right? So my read on this is that this will be of similar consequence to the Industrial Revolution.
Wow.
In that it will change the relation between human cognitive labour and labour.
Right, okay.
And the way that will play out, we have absolutely no idea.
Right.
Because we wouldn't, with steam engines, you wouldn't think, oh yeah, and so the agrarian economy will shift and we will have cities. Like, you wouldn't sort of thread that together.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see similarly disruptive changes to the way society is organised, and no one has any idea about that.
Wow. Right. So we are at the start of something as significant as the Industrial Revolution.
Right now, Nick, on your phone, you have access to something that can do PhD level mathematics, according to researchers at Cambridge doing mathematics, right?
Right.
Something has fundamentally shifted in the capability that you have access to, the tooling that you have access to. So I think it is a very fundamental shift that is happening right now.
And can I ask you about the pace of that? So my very much layperson's perception is that I try something with AI, and it doesn't quite get there sometimes, and then give it another go 3 months later, and it absolutely exceeds what I was asking for in terms of expectations. Is that my inadequacy in terms of asking the wrong question of AI, or is that the speed at which this is developing and improving?
That's the speed at which things are developing and improving.
Right.
So compared to when we last spoke a couple of years ago, the way we were measuring the success of AI was sort of whether it produced plausible text or whether it sort of seemed reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Now the kind of measures that we're using is how long would it take a human to do it? And if you look at the charts of these, it's exponential, right? So as of now, so as of the time of recording this, which is like that's the pace that we're at.
Yeah.
So Claude released Mythos and Fable very recently at the time of recording, and then they had to pull it because the US government introduced export controls. But these can can perform tasks that would take sort of 4 to 6 hours for a skilled human software developer developing software
Yeah.
that it would take them to do. Sort of, so we're talking like almost a whole human's worth of additional capability just from that one prompt.
Yeah.
And I think where it's even scarier or like even more impressive in some ways is this is capability that the human operating it might not have even had in their own brain. So this is doing hacking, for example, that the human might not be able to do, but now they can get cyber assurance on their systems by attempting to hack it using these tools that are more sophisticated than they would be able to create.
Yeah.
And you can see this with these new models, so like Mythos, the number of bug fixes that's happening for like browsers and operating systems has shot up.
Yeah.
Because they're using these tools to probe against their own systems to make sure that they're safe.
Yeah.
And so we know that these systems are causing something to happen. So it's a new capability, and I think we are now on the cusp of that. This is doing stuff that people wouldn't have done. It's not to say people couldn't do it, but it's doing something that people wouldn't have done.
And absolutely, and it's interesting. I had a conversation with our IT director last month, and he was telling me that that massive uptick that you said in terms of patch fixes, and that we were being bombarded with patch fixes to a point where we've had to shift some resource to basically oversee that and put all of those in. So absolutely recognise what you're saying there. Can I just ask about the impact? Because it was interesting when you were talking about the impact on why the Manchester Mathematical Society was set up. Statistical, sorry, I always talk about maths. Sorry, statistical, apologies. And Manchester Statistical Society, I'll get that in mind. And you're talking about how the sort of the impact upon what was an agrarian society at that point. I look at me now, and I know some of our board members listen to this, so I'm slightly hesitant in saying this, but I will get Copilot to basically produce a first draft of many of my reports because it just does all the legwork. But I am slightly worried that is potentially going to de-skill me and actually leave me with a part of my brain that was previously very active, which again just your thoughts on that. Am I worried? Am I overthinking it? Or
no? I think you're on the money, Nick.
Right. Okay.
So when we use our brain in particular ways, it reinforces the pathways. We've seen this. I think I mentioned it on the last podcast actually with Google Maps or Apple Maps. Yeah, you did. Yeah. This changes your hippocampus, your brain structure. Yeah. You've described report writing, so that initial drafting. That's part of our brain we won't be exercising so much, perhaps. And I think actually there's almost like there's a strategic workforce planning bit here, and also almost a duty of care. There needs to be people in organisations thinking about what the skills of the workforce need to be and being intentional about that cognitive outsourcing. So when I'm writing reports, I tend to put a bit of a skeleton in place first.
Right, okay.
So that I'm doing that structuring cognitive labour.
Yeah.
Maybe get AI to fill in a bunch of stuff, and then I go and edit that to make sure that it's exactly the intent that I have. So I'm sort of like human in the loop in 2 points. But I think this sort of pattern of interaction between human and machine, it's changing all the time. And I don't think there's not really a good practice. It just changes so rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think that also points towards we don't know how society and work will change.
Yeah.
But they're definitely changing. Like you just described how the report is almost you interacting with your board and conveying information.
Yeah.
And you're now using AI to augment the way that you do that. And that's cool, right? And in your organisation, loads of people will be doing this as well.
Yeah.
And how thoughtfully we do that is going to determine whether the outcome that the organisation needs is met or not.
Yeah. I remember from our last episode, one of the many things that I took away from that was when you gave the example of a clinician. So you were sort of saying basically AI should do the the sort of scans well, should review the scans, but then for the outliers or for the a random sample, you should have a clinician at the end who
Yes.
does the sort of final sort of check of it. And I suppose that's how I've started to think about using it. It's interesting, even in my subconscious, I have held that example in my head and think, am I at the right point in this, or have I sort of gone at the beginning and not at the end? So it's fascinating, and I think just the fact that we're now having this conversation and that so many, hopefully, of our listeners will be going, oh yeah, I do that, I recognise that. What's changed? What has been the change from when we last met to a position where AI is being so widely used? What was the tipping point in your view, or wasn't the one?
So when we last spoke, AI was quite widely adopted. Perhaps it's just a natural building of momentum. In 2026, there's been a lot more agentic stuff happening. So
What do you mean by agentic?
So this
Just
is-
again,
yeah,
for layperson who's listening, like me.
yeah. So this is where the AI can go off and do things.
Right.
So you can have it perform actions as part of that natural language interface. So you're just typing into whatever tool you want, and it will go off and make a spreadsheet or do whatever. And I think that in the business context has been transformative this year, and the interaction with the computer, with the operating system, has really changed how work takes place. So that's meant there's been much more attention in the stock market on this stuff.
Yeah.
So it was already big back then, and we were talking about like whether it was a bubble that was going to burst.
Yeah.
2 years ago, the bubble at time of recording hasn't burst.
Yeah.
But it sort of has a lot of the 2008 features. But I think there probably wasn't a single thing, but it's the momentum and the capital investments of the market mean that this is happening. Right. We've now got the world's first trillionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many noughts are in a trillion. I don't know.
I wish there was a mathematician here.
Yeah, I was just saying, you should definitely know the answer to that question. Yeah. And I suppose, I know you work with a wide range of organisations on AI, and I know a lot of those are in housing, but I know you work outside housing as well. So I'm really interested in bringing the two together, but particularly the wider world, because I think that's where it's important. And I know we were both recently on a webinar where it was highlighted that this year, I mean, this stat just was mind-blowing. This year, the number of AI agents will exceed the number of humans on the internet. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, oh, wow. And I suppose, in your opinion, are businesses ready for the opportunities that brings, but also the pace and scale of change that the ripple effect from that level of adoption would in effect cause?
Most organizations are very different. We're now in a world where a one-man band can be $1 billion company, right? So this idea of having a one-person company that would be a unicorn, like valued over.
Now I recognise. Now you've used that term. I definitely recognise it. Yeah.
So that is something that could even be possible is absolutely crazy. Those kind of companies are the ones that are really AI enabled. So in my world, it's the smaller companies that have been able to adapt very quickly.
Oh, right, okay.
So like I look after technology for an engineering firm called Porthouse Dean Structural Engineers, and there's a dozen of us in our Manchester office, and we're like AI enabled. Right. So we've got the chief exec writing automations, building new websites, building new products. This is just how we work. But this allows us to really test quickly with customers about whether what we're building is valuable to them and whether they want to engage with it. And the barriers for this have come way down. And we still have skilled software engineers, and we still have skilled structural engineers doing the work. Where I can't help but map this to social housing, right? And we're still laying the foundations for data integrity and the data culture bit that goes with this. And I think the people part of this is just huge, and that it takes a long time to shift the culture, particularly in larger organizations. And registered providers and local authorities, they're not ready at all for a high pace of change. and we've got all this regulatory change happening as well. So it's almost that change capability, however you want to frame that, that we as a sector need to get much better at.
Okay.
So part of that is about AI or emerging technology, but also it's part about regulation. It's part about being able to delight the customer. It's part about, since we last spoke, the social housing waiting list is up by another 200,000 or 300,000 people.
Absolutely.
Right? So we need to be doing things better, and we need to use the tools available to do that.
Yeah.
And one of those tools is AI.
So you mentioned there a great point that that it's generally smaller businesses that are more agile and have been made the best use of AI. For those larger organisations, say, who are now behind the curve, how can they catch up? What do they need to do differently to accelerate that adoption and pace of change?
So, not being harsh here, right? Social housing over the last 50 years hasn't been super amazing at innovation.
I think that's a very kind summary to make. I'm sure Ian Wright at DIN would have a view on that, yes. But and I've also been quite openly critical of our sector because it hasn't had a burning platform like many others have. So it's probably not unsurprising. So please don't feel you need to apologise.
Okay.
You're with friends here.
I'm just caveating slightly. So I think we're also not the only sector that is regulated and wants to be able to innovate to deliver better services, right? The example that I'm thinking of is medicine, which you've already talked about.
Yeah.
And in medicine, it's regulated and it's innovative. So you can look at basically any oncology department doing cancer detection. They've got computer vision specialists. They will have separate R&D teams, like research and development teams, interacting with the clinicians. And they built an operating model for delivering innovation in a life or death situation. And I think we need to be copying from that playbook, rapid prototyping, take risk within an envelope where the risk is tolerable, and transparency built in so that users can try it out early. And I think there's the fragmentation of social housing sort of means that innovation capability has been left behind a little bit. Right. So if you look at, so MHCLG have got this social housing innovation fund that they sort of released the funds for this year. So this is £2 million going into some 20 projects. So MHCLG, the UK government, is also recognising that there needs to be something done in this space, and we need to be able to attract innovators to the sector, and combine them with the expertise that we have within the sector, so that we can deliver on our mission and deliver value for customers. So I think we as a sector need to reflect quite carefully on our innovation capability and about how we're set up to be able to embrace new things. And part of that's like, look at what we've done with Awaab's Law, right? So every organisation has separately worked out how to do this. Yeah. If you look at technology, like smart homes and all this, like carbon, you've had people on your podcast talking about this. We don't all need to invent this from scratch. Yeah. We need to apply it locally, but we don't all need to do it from starting at zero. So I think we need to leverage some of the great practice that we've got across the sector and stop just talking about collaborating, but actually collaborate.
Right. And I think Devo has been a driver for that. But I think it's still got, as you've pointed out, there were several examples, it's still got a considerable way to go. But I do think that's one of the added value spin-off benefits of devolution. And I've sort of previously, written a piece on how the level of collaboration across the housing sector at the moment is at levels I've never experienced in my 30-plus year career. But it doesn't mean that it's a panacea. We're not there yet. There's, as you say, quite right, there's still a lot more to do. I want to talk to one of the areas that I know you're particularly passionate about, and that's responsibility and ethics. And it always comes up whenever I speak to people about AI, particularly those who maybe haven't embraced it quite in the same way that some of us have. And so this isn't just about what AI can do, but also what it should do. And you touched on this in one of your earlier answers. And really being focused on solving real problems rather than just using it for the sake of it, which, you know, I'll be happy to admit when we last met, I was probably in that camp of, well, I need to understand this, so I'll just put penny old rubbish in and see what comes out at the other end. Sure. So there's a lot of discussion around risk and ethics, and I suppose if you were to really boil it down, and again, not just for housing organisations, but what are the biggest risks organisations need to be cognizant of, aware of, and be mindful of whenever they're sort of on this AI journey?
The first thing, it's a meta risk, Nick. I love that. I love it. A meta risk.
I don't think
risk
we've ever
about
had
risk.
we've never had anything described as a meta risk before.
So there's the meta risk is that you don't understand what you're doing, so you can't get assurance on it.
Ah, right. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So that meta risk is part of what you need to make sure that you are able to get assurance in a meaningful way. So that's in any sector. If you've got that in place, then the things that I would tend to look out for are the increased cyber risk. So that's step one. So we don't want to have cyber incidents in social housing. So the barriers to performing very compelling cyber attacks, the risks have gone up of having these really serious cyber incidents. And so we need to make sure that we're taking proportionate response to that. And so the frontier AI stuff, so we were talking a bit earlier about Mythos, organizations need to be aware of this and not reliant on a 1-year IT governance cycle to catch up. So like Cyber Essentials is great, Cyber Essentials Plus, do it every year. What happens in between? So we need to have much more responsive assurance and governance structures sitting around all of this. The risk-related things I tend to map to the regulatory context. So it's about not being compliant with GDPR. So this is a really big one.
Yeah.
So the Data Use and Access Act, sort of EDI-related things. We've got reputational risk. Does a customer want to receive an email, like a response to their complaint that looks like it's written by ChatGPT?
Yeah.
No. Particularly for organisations that are centred on the customer, like housing is or should be. It's about the risk is in not listening in the way that you think you are to the customer, because you've outsourced your thinking about this to a tool that you don't really understand.
Yeah.
And so you think you're listening and you've got this all great, but actually you haven't really understood what you've built, so you're not listening properly.
Wow.
And I think the regulatory environment will end up putting a lot more scrutiny on that.
So, Guy, we've talked a lot about where we've been with AI and also where we are right now. One of the big questions that people are asking, and you gave a little hint to this, is where this is all going. And of course, that goes far beyond individual organisational level. It's about where's this going to take us in terms of as a society, at a governmental level, global leadership, and also, you know, we can't not talk about the future of our planet when we talk about AI and some of the environmental balances that are there. So do you get a sense that this is all, you know, an American sort of phrase, but all gas and no brakes, or in terms of how AI is developing, or do you feel that there is some level of control, or do you just think it's developed its own momentum?
This is a race. There's no brakes.
Right. Okay.
So the only sorts of brakes that we've seen so far have been the export controls that were sort of put on by the US government on Mythos and Fable, which were released by Anthropic.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a conversation went on where the US government said we can't allow non-US nationals to use this, and then Anthropic said, well, we therefore cannot allow this to be used by anybody, and so then it shut it down. This was something that in my business we were using these tools, and 5 days after release it's all shut down. Nobody in the world can use this anymore. And that's the kind of geopolitical bit that you pointed towards, is now for the first time in June 26 we've seen that real geopolitical thing start to play out, and we're starting to see some of the strategic decoupling between Europe and the US.
Right.
and the way this interacts with the Chinese models, I think, is also very interesting geopolitically, because China has made a lot of their models open source. It's a very different way of interacting with this technology that the Chinese government are promoting through the various organizations that are based in China. So I think it is absolutely a race. The brakes are not available at all. You look at all the IPOs, so the listings on the US stock market of these companies, it is hell for leather. And we almost, even the UK government, can't do anything about it, which is insane.
Which for many people listening, that will be quite a frightening statement. So what needs to happen next to make sure that AI develops the right way for societal gain as opposed to organisational profit gain?
So we have, in the UK, sort of bigging up the UK a little bit, we have the AI Security Institute, which is really well-renowned thing. It used to be called the AI Safety Institute, which also tells you something about what's going on there. But the AI Security Institute has a really good reputation and is delivering some good work in terms of making sure the AI that we are using is secure and in the nation's interests. We've also got a lot around sovereign AI. So this is building data centers in the UK. They are extremely secure facilities with multiple power grids. It's all very cool. And that's about making sure that the country has resilience in this. So there's, again, many millions of pounds going into the creation of these new data centers.
Right.
You've pointed towards some of the carbon sort of
Absolutely.
concerns here. But I think this is at the highest strategic level, is where does Britain sit in this? And we still have the AI Opportunities Action Plan, which is basically, government wants us to go for AI, and we're getting some of these hubs set up now where there's going to be more investment and more focus on AI. For example, in Cardiff and near Manchester, there's also going to be more investment. It's all moving very fast, and our sort of our ability to be masters of our own destiny as a country, I think, is a little bit in the balance when it comes to AI. This isn't the Industrial Revolution where we were sort of, if the workshop of the world was up in Glasgow, right? Like it's Cottonopolis in Manchester. We were creating these machines which were driving the world economy, and that's not what's happening now.
Right. Okay. So it is different in that regard. So maybe at a UK level then, bearing in mind what you said about the example there from the US, but if you drop down to the UK, how confident are you that tech leaders and the UK government are ready to manage this properly within the UK setting? So let's just, or can you not differentiate? Is this almost without borders?
So I think without borders is probably the right way to look at it in this global world that we live in. It's however, there's still how does the UK navigate this changing geopolitical landscape?
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to be political, Nick, but I think strong leadership is required in this sort of technical space.
Right.
Organisations within the UK, it really varies in terms of where that leadership capability is. We've got some fantastic tech leaders in the country, real innovators and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of really great stuff happening. And we have no foundation models that we've built in the UK. So these really, like the underpinning language technologies that are being built into these models, we've not got one. China's got them.
Right.
The US have got them. France has got one. And we don't have one. Do we need one? I don't know. It depends on your geopolitical stance. But I know that these things are taking place at a government level, is they are thinking about what we're doing. So have I received assurance that we're doing a good job with a sort of board kind of hat on? No, I've not received assurance.
Right.
But I think that people in leadership positions are really aware of what's happening in the stock market, and then that is sort of impacting on where the focus is for the country strategically.
Okay.
I think that's the way around it goes with these things. Where's the money? That's where the focus
sort
is.
of financial drivers for good probably is. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. That's fascinating. you know the score now with this.
Yeah.
You've done this before. You've spent the last sort of period of time answering my questions. So it's the bit I'm always hesitant about, which is your chance to flip the mic. Basically, what do you want to ask from the other side of the microphone?
Yeah, well, so I've been given time to prepare for this as well, Nick. So I hope you're.
That's even more worrying. Yeah.
So I've got a couple of questions for you, if that's all right. So the first one is about what positives has AI brought to Yorkshire housing?
I think a few big things really. I think it's enabled us to spot trends that we weren't able to see before. So some of the, I suppose what you class as data analytics, but just highlighting causal factors behind things so that we can prevent things from happening. It's part of our big strategy from moving from reactive to preemptive. But it's almost happened as an unintentional byproduct rather than part of that strategy that we've got. And I always say that AI has been the superpower that we never knew we needed that has driven our transition from reactive to preemptive. So it's absolutely supercharged it, not just turbocharged it, but supercharged it. So I think it's also helping us, as part of that,